Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are going to let folks come in from the lobby and click on their webinar links, and we'll get started in like 30 seconds. Okay, well, we will jump in. My name is Amanda Hansen. I'm the Deputy Secretary for Climate Change at the Natural Resources Agency here in California, and I want to express my appreciation for you joining us during the lunch hour to participate in this workshop that's focused on California's developed lands and how we can, nope, that's tomorrow.
Shrublands.
Shrublands. I apologize. Oh, I was mentally tomorrow, you guys. I apologize. California's shrublands and chaparral, and how our climate policies can help support and keep healthy and resilient our shrublands and chaparral, and how those landscape types can help deliver on California's climate goals. So before I dive in, I'm going to share a couple of housekeeping items, and I'll walk through the agenda and talk a little bit about our goals for today, and then I'll hand it off to my colleague Clessy, who will go into a little bit more detail on shrublands and chaparral. So my housekeeping items are just a request to please stay muted when others are talking. Secondly, just to make sure everyone is clear, we're going to be recording this webinar and we're going to post it on our website so everyone can see me say developed lands when I should have said shrublands and chaparral. And then third, if anyone needs or wants to access closed captioning, I'm going to tell you how to do that right now. You go to meeting controls at the top right of your screen and you select more, and then you select language and speech, and then you select turn on live captions. And if you have any questions or challenges in getting that done, just please notify us in the chat and we'll do what we can to help. So I think big picture, wanted to share when we started public engagement to update our natural and working lands climate smart strategy, which was released in 2022. We have a statutory requirement to update it in 2025. We kicked off the process with a webinar that really did a deep dive on what is the approach that we took in 2022? What are ways that we're thinking about making changes or adjustments to the update in 2025? And then also just kind of provided a little bit of backstory on the evolution of our work in the nature-based solutions space over the last few years, just as context for the work to update the strategy here in 2024. So if anyone's interested in taking a look at that kickoff webinar, it's on our website. The goal today is not to focus on necessarily that big picture, but really to do a deep dive on California's shrubland and chaparral, huge landscape in California, and really kind of hear from all of you about ways that we can ensure the update to this strategy really reflects the latest and greatest in our understanding of those landscapes and how we can manage them for climate benefits and how we can protect them from the impacts of climate change. In a few minutes, I'm going to hand this over to Clessy. She will essentially start this workshop off with a deep dive on our approach to shrublands and chaparral in the 2022 strategy, just to refresh everyone's memory. And then we're going to, she'll also kind of tick through some of the process ahead and give you all some, I think, helpful information and context. And then we're going to turn it over to all of you. Our goal is to really utilize this as a public listening session where we hear from members of the public on ways that we can ensure that this strategy is really reflects the latest and greatest and will deliver on the priorities of the people that we serve. So we got a lot of really wonderful input when we developed our 2022 strategy, and we're really hoping to have that same level of engagement as we update for 2025. So just want to express my appreciation for you taking the time to be here today. And look forward to hearing from you. I think the last thing I'll say before I hand it off to Clessy is we've held a number of these workshops over the last few days, and I will say they have been characterized by moments of silence. And I think that's very natural because some people come and they say what they want to say, and then they want to listen and hear what others have to say. And sometimes you have to think about it for a little bit. So Klesi and I will be on this line until 1 o'clock, here to listen to any input that people want to provide. And we're not intimidated or concerned about silence. So, please, if you'd like to say what you have to say and then leave, that's fine. If you'd like to say what you have to say and then say some more a little bit later, that's also fine. So we welcome any and all input. And I'll hand it over to Klesi to introduce herself and get us started. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen here. All right, are you able to see the deck? Yes, okay. So I'm gonna start with a high-level description of our proposed approach for the 2025 update. We will be revisiting the heart of the 2022 strategy, which were these landscape focus sections. In each of those sections, we included a discussion of the climate benefits that can be afforded by those landscapes, as well as a list of priority nature-based climate solutions. So we'll be updating each of those sections with any new science, as well as revisiting those priority nature-based climate solutions to reflect changes in management on the ground and also what we hear from you all. Second, we're going to be updating our landscape maps, where we map each landscape based on land cover. So we'll be integrating the most recent land cover data into those. Third, we will take the next step in our approach to tracking action and measuring outcomes of that action in the natural and working land sector. Fourth, we'll have a new section to the strategy in the update, which is meant to identify barriers to implementing priority nature-based climate solutions and solutions to overcome them. So this is the question that we're really keen to get your feedback on. And then lastly, we'll end with a section on what has really happened at the state from 2022 until this update. And then we will update our near-term priorities for action starting in 2025 and going forward. So next I'll go over the process for the update. We had a kickoff webinar, as Amanda mentioned, on February 1st. And we are now in the midst of holding landscape-specific workshops through the end of the month. We are also holding an early tribal consultation period, as well as tribal roundtables this spring. We plan to release a draft of the strategy in June, and that will be followed by a public comment period. After that, we will also have an additional tribal consultation period and additional tribal roundtables, all leading up to the publication of the final strategy in January 2025. So as I mentioned, this month we are holding a series of landscape workshops. Today we're talking about shrublands and chaparral. Tomorrow we will continue with developed lands. All right, so now for a bit of a deep dive into shrublands and chaparral. This landscape is categorized by land with 10% or more shrub or chaparral cover. It's generally dominated by woody plants, but lacks tree cover, and covers approximately 31% of the state. This is largely federal ownership at almost 70% of those shrublands, and this is followed by private land ownership at just over a quarter of our shrublands and chaparral. And you can see on the map where these shrubland systems are concentrated, and they really are found throughout the entire state, but most concentrated in the southern part of the state and in the deserts. So shrublands and chaparral, if managed in a climate smart manner, can provide many benefits for us, including carbon storage, habitat connectivity, recreation opportunities, and protect communities from climate impacts such as flooding or debris flow. This is a particularly fire-prone landscape, but there is not a clear consensus on how to mitigate these risks. So to ensure these climate benefits going forward, There are really three areas of focus. One is minimizing human-caused ignitions. Second, minimizing disturbance to these lands. And lastly, restoring degraded shrublands in Chaparral. So you can see those three tenets reflected in the priority nature-based climate solutions that we identified in the 2022 Natural Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy. And these were to protect shrublands in Chaparral from development and conversion and restore the degraded systems, to build healthy soils, to reduce wildfire risk, especially near communities, and lastly, using managed grazing with goats for fuels management. We also identified a number of cross-cutting priorities in the 2022 strategy, and these priorities are meant to span across all of our different landscapes. This section was really improved and informed by the public comment that we received on the draft of the strategy and in 2022, where we realized that we had a number of actions that we wanted to see across all of our landscapes. So I'm not going to read these in depth here, but I will just touch on the themes that they address, and that's equity and community engagement and the implementation of nature-based solutions, landscape level approaches and adaptive management, technical assistance and workforce development, leveraging and scaling resources through partnerships, tribal management and co-management, protecting lands that deliver multiple benefits, advancing durable conservation measures, combating invasive species, and lastly, capacity building of nurseries and seed banks to meet our restoration and reforestation goals. So we're now going to transition into the discussion part of this workshop, and I have a few guidelines here. One is to please use the raised hand function if you would like to speak, and we will call on you, and if you can introduce yourself before you give your input, that would be great. You can also put any input that you may have in the chat if you're unable to come off of mute. And if we are unable to get to your comment, or if you have additional comments, you can email those to us and I'll put that information in the chat. So with that, we've prepared 4 questions for you that we'd really like your input on. One is, are there changes that you'd recommend to those existing priority nature-based climate solutions on shrublands and chaparral? 2, are there changes you'd recommend to the existing cross-cutting priorities? And both of these I just walked through, and I'll also put a link to those in the chat so you can view them on your own screens. 3rd and 4th, helping us with our new section on barriers. So 3rd, what are the biggest barriers to implementing these priority nature-based climate solutions? What solutions might exist to overcome them? And how can we at the state government most usefully advance these solutions? So I'm going to go on mute and stop sharing. You all a minute to start queuing up. All right, first we have Dan.
Hi, everyone. I didn't know I'd be first up. I'd first like to say that I'm with Endangered Habitats League Southern California Regional Group. We work very much in chaparral and coastal sage scrub protection and management. And we thought that the analysis, the recommendations, the threats, and so forth outlined, in the document were very well put together, scientifically sound, and particularly calling in that they called attention to an excess of disturbance right now in shrub systems from frequent human-caused ignitions, for example, as well as quote normal fires, and but, in terms of implementation and doing something about it, the report calls for reducing, this conversion, right, of shrublands to non-native grasslands due to excess disturbance. But how do you do that? And one of the things that my group's concerned about is that the fire management by CAL FIRE and the Board of Forestry is not in sync with the scientific approach outlined in this document, because CAL FIRE in its vegetation treatment program still calls for landscape level treatments in shrublands, coastal sage scrub and chaparral, treatments that are beyond defensible space, beyond so-called fuel breaks or fire breaks, but landscape level treatments, herbicides, prescribed fire, thinning, and so on a large scale, which would seem to contradict the recommendations in this document. And I think to really get past this, all of this is really under the Resources Agency, and I would call on the Resources Agency to bring some scientific collaboration to bear, with scientific community, for example, the California Fire Science Consortium, CAL FIRE, get some constructive discussions going again so that we can reach the consensus that I think we need to reach. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Rich?
Hi. Thanks. So yeah, just reviewing the materials again that you put together and, you know, the map that you have of shrublands and chaparral, which covers several really different ecosystems. I know you know that. So the work that I'm doing with the FRAP assessment, and I might have mentioned this before, is showing that one of the biggest threats is invasive grasses and their ability to wick fire among shrubs in the desert and in the Great Basin that may be atypical. You know, cheatgrass is the main problem in the Great Basin. I think red brome might be the main problem in the lower elevations of the Mojave. Not sure where this shows up in your analysis, but I would say that's a huge threat to just the shrubs themselves with an unnatural, we'll say an historically unnatural fire regime being introduced. And I guess I'm just wondering how we could address some of that in this, if it's possible to reduce the invasives. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Hi, this is Carrie Nixon. I'm with Rincon Consultants. I'm a climate sustainability planner. I've worked on a couple of carbon sequestration feasibility studies in the Bay Area, and through that have worked with some RCDs and the UC Cooperative Extension, rangeland advisors, and counties throughout the Bay Area. I just wanted to weigh in that in our experience in looking at some of the data at the county level, some of the stakeholders were a bit, especially from the rangeland side, a bit incredulous about there being an issue of encroachment of grass into shrub, but rather anecdotally, and in some cases there was like some limited research that showed that encroachment of shrub into grasslands due to reduced like grazing pressure, and in some cases wildfire was the trend that they were expecting to see in the data, and where they were expecting to see recommendations. And so I think it would be helpful to provide more detail, perhaps in mapping and in the narrative of the strategy of, where invasives, grass encroachment is an issue, geographically or like species wise, versus shrub encroachment. And yeah, I think that would be helpful, just because there's different interests and parties involved that have different experiences. And so it would be good to provide a little bit more context on like what species are involved and where. And when, encroachment in either direction is the issue. So that way there's just more clarity for counties who are trying to implement some of these measures. Thanks.
Thank you.
Plessy? I don't think your mic is on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Um, I was just saying in our last few minutes here, I wanted to put up the dates of the future workshops up here and also mention that we are also accepting written input through the end of the month. So if you want to contribute something in writing or you have a colleague who wasn't able to make it that wants to weigh in, please let them know. And you can send that to naturebasedsolutions@resources.ca.gov.
All right, well, I think we've come to the end of our hour here. Appreciate those of you who hung in with us just to hear if people had recommendations, and many thanks to those who weighed in. Please take a look, see if there's any others you're interested in joining, and look forward to hearing everyone's thoughts on the draft when it comes out a little later this year. Thank you all so much. Thanks, Clessy.